Hey guys, welcome to my Samoan language instruction on titles and etiquette. This isn't going to be a very large, if at all, language instruction. It's more of a cultural instruction where you need to kind of understand these things if you're going to be visiting, especially Western Samoa. Outside, it's not quite as strong, but you'll still see the culture very prevalent. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is honorific titles, and this kind of comes down to the chief system. There's lots of different types of chiefs in Samoa. I guess there's only two, but then you also have to give their spouses a title as well. So in many places in Samoan, it is proper and polite to address people by recognizing the role they hold in their society. The following words will help you address people with the proper honorific expression. So starting with the high chief, this is called an ali'i, okay? And the term of address that you call these people is your lordship. That's the equivalent to lau awhionga. So if I'm talking to a high chief, then I want to say lau awhionga in a lot of different ways. So how are you? Your lordship is a good way to use that, and a lot of different other ways whenever you need to justly use their title. The wife of a high chief is considered a faletua. I guess the high chief's wife is considered a faletua, and the way that you address her is ma'am, and for her specifically, you say oi le faletua. Okay, so you can either just say faletua or oi le faletua. That's two different ways. You'll hear both. The orator, this is a talking chief. These guys are very well spoken. They're very, very eloquent. They use a lot of proverbs, and it's hard to understand them for me as a palangi. And they're considered tula fales. And the way that you address them, you call them your highness, and that is lau to fa. And there's a longer version to this as well, but I wanted to keep it simple. If you hear anything with lau to fa, and then anything after it, it's basically just a fancier version of that term of addressment. Then we have his wife of the talking chief, which is considered a tausi, and her term of address is considered ma'am. But for her specifically, it's oi le tausi or tausi. So that's for her. And then we have an untitled man, and the untitled man is not a chief. These are called tau le'as, and the way that you address them is sir and lau sasunga. Okay, that's how you would address an untitled man. His wife is considered a faletua, so the same as the high chief. Don't ask me why. You consider her, or you call out to her by the term ma'am, and it's again the same as the high chief's wife, oi le faletua. So if you don't know their title, then you stick with just this one. You stick with lau sasunga or oi le faletua or faletua. You stick with those. The most polite thing to do, so I've been told, if you're going to be talking to some high chief or talking chief, the most appropriate thing to do is to find out from someone else their title and their chief name. Each one of these chiefs has their own name that they've been given at the time that they were, I guess, initiated as a chief. So the most appropriate thing to do is to ask someone else about them. It's almost like them trying to, be humble or not conceited. I guess it's that's at least the take that I get on it. You can ask them in a polite way. I don't teach you how to do that in this video. I'll do that in probably a more advanced video. But again, if you don't know, and especially if you're an outsider, if you just stick with Lao Sasunga or Oile Falitua, and then you find out, they'll probably be a little easier on you if you're a Samoan. Sorry, Samoans from America. They're usually a little harder on you. But if they know you're from outside, then they usually are a little bit more lenient too, I think. So the respectful way to say children is nofu a'alo. And that, usually when I hear it, it's pronounced nofu alo. I don't really hear the A, the middle A a lot. I do hear it, that A right there, but it's not as often as I just hear nofu alo. Then ainga ali'i, this kind of is a respectful way to refer to the whole family, and we'll get into more ways on how to use that and all of these terms in a later video. I just wanted you to be aware of these and maybe familiarize with them so that when we use them in the future that you'll be able to come back on this knowledge. Awesome. Samoan etiquette, again, this is more of a cultural lesson. Not all of the lessons that I'm going to teach, but just some proper Samoan etiquette. And this isn't meant to be a comprehensive list. Remember, I am a Palangi. I lived there for 2 years, and I picked up on quite a few things, but I might have gotten by with some things. They might have thought a couple times I was being le mau fau fau. That means not thinking. And that is very mamafa, heavy, or it's a lot worse to be called. You weren't thinking in Samoan than it is in English. English is just like maybe a minor insult, but in Samoan you don't want to hear someone tell you that you were not thinking, especially mau fau fau. Anyway, so there's a number of things to ngata mai ifafo. So outsiders. So literally that means people from outside, is how they say outsiders, should know concerning the Samoan culture. Below is a list of items to recognize before visiting Samoa to maintain a proper conduct while there. Observe the following. Again, this isn't comprehensive, but this is the things that I thought was most necessary to point out to you. And I'm going to leave a couple links for websites for you to go to learn additional items, maybe minor, but nonetheless more things. So Samoans observe Sunday as a day of rest. Many tourist attractions will remain open. However, please proceed with caution from point A to B. Travel slowly and behave quietly near villages. So if you're at the resort or your hotel, you should be okay. If you go outside of that, especially in villages, outside of Apia, then you're going to want to behave appropriately. Try not to maybe act ridiculous in a number of different ways. Just try to see what they're seeing. They see the Sabbath day to be a holy day. That's actually what they call it, the holy day. And so just kind of keep that in mind while you're visiting. Excuse me. Number 2, immodest clothing is not recommended in villages. When leaving the beach, visitors should put on additional clothing. So you should be okay at your resort, especially if it's near a beach, in your clothing that you're accustomed to wearing on the beach. But if you go outside of that area, or if you go away from the beach, I would recommend putting on additional clothing. For women, maybe a lava or some shorts or pants and a shirt, and for males, maybe a lava or a shirt at least. 3, shoes should be removed before entering someone's house. So if you do go to someone's house, or if you're invited to someone's house, remove your shoes before entering the house. That is something that's pretty rude, to walk into someone's house with your shoes on. 4, if attending church on Sunday, women are asked to wear a dress or blouse, or a skirt of some sort, while men are asked to wear a shirt and slacks. And so one thing, the slacks can be substituted for a thing called an ie faitanga, and that's kind of like a lava but fancier. And it literally means, ie means cloth, and then faitanga, that has pockets. Tanga means pockets, and fai is kind of like do or has. So cloth that has pockets. They're kind of nice. I wish I had one still. 5, always seek approval from host before taking photographs in a village. This one's kind of being a little bit more strict. You should be fine in this case for most things, but just to be cautious and to be respectful, if you're with someone, I would try to seek approval before taking photographs. 6, most of the land in Samoa is owned by a family. While visiting beaches, waterfalls, swimming holes, etc., you may be asked to pay a small entry fee. So this is something that is pretty common, I guess. There's a lot of attractions, especially for people from outside, and or tourists is what we call. And in a lot of cases, you either need to get permission before entering it, or you need to pay a small fee. And usually it's not a huge fee. It's like 5 or 10 tala, which is $2 to $5 American, and depending if you're from New Zealand or Australia or wherever, that should be a pretty small fee. And then another thing is if you do go somewhere and you're intending to ask for permission or something, try to get the permission before you enter the location, whether it be a waterfall or swimming hole or whatever. Before you go, it's better to get permission than to get in trouble. If you're with someone, if you're staying with a host, sometimes they can get in trouble, so just try to be conscientious of that. These are a couple things that I found on the internet, and obviously it's not for me because I am not artistic at all. So I'm leaving in the link. I'm leaving a link in the on the video of of a couple different sites. This is one of them. One Samoana, I think that's how you pronounce it. And she or he, I guess, is very artistic. And I thought there was a couple more things to articulate, and this wasn't quite as boring as what my presentation was. So what's the magic word too low? So this means excuse me in a lot of different ways. And in particular, if you're going to walk in between someone, you're definitely going to want to use this word too low. What I mean by walking in between two people or a group of people while they're speaking, you're definitely going to want to say too low. If there's any way possible to go around the group or the individual speaking, then that is probably the more preferred route, to just go around them if it's possible. If it's not possible to go around them, let's say they're in a hallway and one person's on one wall and the other's on the other side, then and you have to go in between them, still try to say too low while walking past them to excuse yourself. It's rude to do that, to kind of obstruct their vision when they're talking to someone else. So you need to excuse yourself. And the other thing is that while you're, if you're a little bit younger, if you're, a teenager or a young adult, you're definitely going to want to probably bend your head down, and that's an extra courtesy. If you're a little older than that, maybe your 30s or older, then you'll probably get by with not bending your head down. But again, if you're my age, you're in your 20s or your teenage years, you're definitely going to want to bend your head down in an additional sign of respect. Okay, I think that's all. And if you ever need to just excuse yourself, usually you can get by with too low. So moving on, don't offer to do something, just consider don't offer to do something kind or considerate. Just do it. So this is kind of like what she was trying to say is like, instead of just asking someone, oh, do you want help with that? Just help them. Stay clean if you're staying at someone's house. Do the dishes. Keep the area. So basically, you can just be courteous. So moving on. This one's a little bit, I don't know if it's politically correct, but we're not really looking for that in Samoan culture. Unless you want to see jandals. Jandals is another way that they say sandals. I don't know why. It's just a funny thing that they say. Fly, don't eat on your feet. So this is something that's really, really different for Westerners. And this right here, because only animals eat while standing up, that's a little harsh, but they kind of have this mentality towards people who stand up or, I guess, stand up and eat or drink. So, I mean, obviously at your resort, you'll be okay. But if you're ever, in town, I would even say probably in Apia, I would, if you have a snack or anything like that, a bottle of water, try to find a place to sit down before you drink it or eat it. And this is just a common courtesy that they expect. So moving on to the next one. When your elders are seated, you sit down. So someone probably similar to your age or older, you're definitely going to want to sit down when they're seated. Especially if they're talking to you or if you're talking to them, you're definitely going to want to sit down. So the sign of respect is talking to someone at eye level or even below them in some cases. So it is okay for your elders to be standing while you're sitting and talking. It's just a way of kind of showing respect to the elders, that they're on a higher level of respect than you. So you're going to want to be at the same level or lower if at all possible. That's not to say, like, if they're sitting, you need to, lay down. That's ridiculous. But, yeah, if you can, if they're sitting, crouch down or sit down. And that just shows some respect. Obviously, this is somewhat not feasible in all cases. So I do have a little bit of an explanation here. The most appropriate thing to do while talking to someone who is seated is to sit down yourself. So that's the number one thing that you should do if there's a chair or if, they're on the grass and you can do that, then sit. Crouching is another worthy alternative. So if there's nowhere really appropriate to sit or you're in a hurry, you can crouch down. That's totally okay. As far as alternatives, however, in some instances, it's just not feasible. Sometimes you just can't do this. And some instances are, you're in a hurry, you need to get somewhere. And just lots of different things where, you might be older and you can't, it'd be too hard on your joints or whatever to sit down. They're not expecting you, if you're, I would say, probably your mid-40s and above to do this. But if at all possible, try to do this. So again, if it's not feasible, if you just can't do this, then you can excuse yourself and you state tautala tuatu before you say anything. So if they're speaking out to you, the first thing you say is tautala tuatu, which means I'm speaking while standing, and then you give a response of some sort. And or if you talk out to them, you can do that as well. Again, try to lower yourself in some way. If that's not feasible, then excuse yourself using this phrase. Then speaking on the road is considered an awkward location to have a meaningful conversation in Samoan. The conversation isn't necessarily awkward, but in the Fa'asamoa, the situation is awkward. When speaking on the road, it is recommended to excuse yourself before speaking. This is the case even when someone calls out to you. So while you're on the road, this is considered to be an awkward location to have a conversation. Samoans tend to generally have their worthwhile conversations sitting down. They think that you'll be more invested that way, and it's just more natural than standing and speaking. So they have a little bit of a take on conversations on the road than we do in, the Western society, I guess. So this is just keep in mind, you got to do a couple more things. So I know this is terrible and this is really long, but just try to stick with me. So generally what takes place is someone will call out to you from their home or property as you are walking down the road. So this is what generally happens. Your initial response to excuse yourself, to excuse yourself should be avane le saunoanga or vaiatu le saunoanga. Kind of like saying, along with your talk or your thought or your speech, along with what you're saying, and then you use one of those two, whichever one you want, and then you say Tautala tuatu, and then you add ile tulanga valea. So this is again speaking while standing, and then in this last part is in the dumb situation that I am, or the awkward situation that I am. So again, this, for some reason, it's an awkward situation to have conversations on the road. So normally there are 3 different outcomes to this road scenario. In the first case, they'll ask you where you're going. Usually they'll say wa, fa'fea, or fa'afefea, whichever, and excuse yourself for talking on the road, so you'll do one of these along with that, and then you'll tell them where you're heading. So that's what you do in that circumstance. The other 2 involve them inviting you into their home, in many cases to offer you food or beverage. So they're trying to be nice generally, at least in my experience, to offer you some food or beverage, especially when it's a hot day and they see that you're sweating. They're going to tell you to get away from the sun. They hate the sun. It causes all sickness and whatever else might happen. So here you can either accept or reject their offer. In accepting, you only need to excuse yourself. So you'll use one of those along with that. And then you can say something similar to ya or yoi fa'afatai. One of those. When you reject their offer, this one requires a little bit more. You need to excuse yourself, one of these again, along with that. And then you'll also need to say something like fa'afatai le falawalo, and that's thanks for the respect. And then you'll say sorry, fa'amalie atu, and then you'll tell them where you're going or what's keeping you busy. So these are some cultural things. Obviously, there's more to the culture than just what we said here. And I didn't give you, again, this was more of a cultural discussion. And in my next video, I think we're going to be discussing this road scenario a little bit more in depth. So I gave you kind of the main things. You need to start off with this. Then they'll ask you wa fa fea. Then I'm going to give you some different things that you can say on how to tell them where you're heading. Or you can just say yoi fa fatai, or you can give them an excuse to why you're not going to be able to join them. So I hope this cultural lesson was beneficial, and hopefully this will help you be a little bit more courteous when you travel to, especially Western Samoa, Tutuila, American Samoa. They do this a little bit too, and outside is probably not as prevalent. I'm sure it is prevalent, but probably not quite as strong as it is in the actual mainland. So until next time, guys, tofa soifua.